If you're over 60, the airline industry no longer treats you like a standard passenger, even though no one ever tells you that directly. Nothing on your ticket changes. Your seat looks the same. The rules appear identical. But behind the scenes, the system assumes your body moves slower, needs more time, and creates more complications than it did years ago. Modern air travel is designed for speed, automation, and volume, not for aging joints, medical needs, or longer recovery times. And when those realities collide with rigid policies, the burden quietly falls on you, not the airline. Most passengers don't realize this until something goes wrong. A delay, a denial, a situation that suddenly feels unfair and unexplained. And the most uncomfortable part is this: many of the risks don't come from breaking rules, they come from how you behave. Passengers over 60 are often the most polite people in the airport, and that's exactly why they get overlooked. You wait your turn. You don't want to bother anyone. You don't complain when the line is long or when instructions are rushed. You assume if there's a problem, someone will step in and help. But modern air travel doesn't work that way anymore. The system doesn't respond to courtesy. It responds to signals. If you don't ask for assistance, the system assumes you don't need it. If you don't speak up when something feels difficult, no accommodation is triggered. And once the process moves forward, it doesn't slow down for anyone. Many passengers over 60 unknowingly forfeit protections simply by staying quiet. Extra time, early boarding, physical assistance. These aren't automatically offered. They're only activated when requested. And the moment you don't request them, the rules treat you the same as a healthy 30-year-old moving at full speed. That's when people start feeling frustrated, confused, or unfairly rushed. Not because they did something wrong, but because they were playing by an older set of expectations. And this disconnect becomes a real problem the moment you reach security and the terminal itself. TSA will tell you that every passenger is screened the same way. Technically, that's true. But what they don't explain is how the process reacts when your body doesn't fit the system's ideal profile. Screening equipment is calibrated for speed, posture, and quick compliance. When those things change, the process changes too. For many passengers over 60, that means joint replacements, medical implants, limited mobility, or slower reaction times quietly increase the chances of additional screening. A scanner flags something, a motion takes longer, instructions need to be repeated. None of this means you did anything wrong, but it does mean the process pauses around you. Secondary screening isn't a punishment, but it is a delay, and delays compound fast inside an airport. Shoes back on, bags rechecked, a quiet pat-down, a supervisor review. Each step adds minutes you didn't plan for, and no one pauses the clock while it happens. The uncomfortable truth is that TSA's job isn't to protect your schedule, it's to move the line. When your screening takes longer than expected, the system keeps advancing without you. And once time starts slipping at security, airlines are under no obligation to wait. Many passengers over 60 travel with medical items that TSA technically allows, until the moment those items slow the process down. Medications, liquid prescriptions, ointments, gel packs, CPAP batteries, cooling packs. None of these are unusual, none of them are illegal, but they are often unfamiliar to the officers screening hundreds of bags per hour. When one of these items appears on the scanner, the bag stops moving. It gets pulled aside. Questions are asked. Labels are checked. Sometimes a supervisor is called. And while TSA policy allows medically necessary items to exceed standard limits, enforcement still requires verification. That verification takes time. This is where many travelers feel their first loss of control. You're standing there explaining something you've carried for years. You're answering calmly. You're doing everything right. But the clock is still running, and no one is tracking how close you are to boarding. What most passengers don't realize is that TSA isn't required to hurry because of your flight time. Their responsibility ends at security. Every extra minute spent clarifying a medical item is a minute silently removed from your boarding window. And once that window starts shrinking, the pressure builds fast, whether you feel it or not. Many passengers over 60 don't actually miss their flight. The system simply moves on without them. From the airline's perspective, Boarding is a timed process, not a flexible one. Once boarding begins, the countdown is already running, and it rarely accounts for what just happened at security. Extra screening adds minutes. Long terminals add distance. Moving carefully, rather than quickly, adds more time. None of this is dramatic on its own, but together, it quietly pushes you closer to the cutoff. By the time you reach the gate, boarding may already be in its final stages or completely closed. At that point, the situation is no longer negotiable. The gate agent sees a late arrival, not the reason behind it. The door is closing. The aircraft is on schedule. And once that line is crossed, the rules change instantly. This is where many travelers feel the sharp edge of unfairness. You followed instructions. You allowed extra time. You didn't break any rules. But because the system doesn't slow down for explanations, you're treated the same as someone who arrived late by choice. And once you're off that flight, the consequences don't stop at the gate. Rebooking isn't just an inconvenience. For passengers over 60, it can become a serious disruption. When you're removed from your original flight, the next option is rarely ideal. Later departures, longer layovers, and unfamiliar aircraft layouts suddenly replace the plan you carefully prepared for. Seats are another quiet downgrade. Rebooked passengers are often placed wherever space exists, not where comfort is best. That can mean middle seats, tighter rows, or being separated from travel companions. In many cases, the only option left is standby, which adds hours of uncertainty with no guarantee you'll even get on the next flight. What makes this harder is the physical toll: sitting longer, walking farther, waiting without clear information. For younger travelers, this is frustrating. For older passengers, it's exhausting. And if delays stretch into the evening, an overnight stay at the airport or a rushed hotel transfer becomes a real possibility. This is where the experience stops feeling like a travel issue and starts feeling personal. Comfort disappears, dignity slips, and all of it traces back to a delay that wasn't entirely in your control. Unfortunately, the situation often worsens once checked luggage enters the picture. When an airline misplaces your luggage, compensation rules sound reassuring until you look at what they actually cover. For many passengers over 60, the most valuable items in a checked bag aren't clothes or shoes. They're medications, medical supplies, braces, or health-related equipment that can't be easily replaced. Airline policies often exclude or strictly limit reimbursement for these items. Even when a claim is approved, the payout rarely reflects the real cost or urgency involved. Replacement timelines are measured in days, sometimes weeks, but medical needs don't wait. This is where fear starts to replace frustration. A missing bag isn't just an inconvenience anymore. It can mean missed doses, unmanaged pain, or the inability to use necessary support devices. And while airlines may advise you to purchase essentials, their definition of essential often doesn't align with what your body actually requires. What makes this worse is that passengers are rarely warned in advance. No one explains that certain items are better kept close at all times, or that reimbursement has limits that don't match real-world health risks. So travelers adapt, assuming carry-on luggage will protect them. Unfortunately, that assumption introduces a different set of problems entirely. Gate agents today operate under tighter rules and less flexibility than most passengers realize, and heavier carry-ons draw immediate attention. For travelers over 60, that's a problem because carry-on bags often contain more than just clothing. Medical supplies, extra medications, support devices, and personal comfort items add weight quickly, even when the bag looks reasonable. At the gate, enforcement is fast and final. A bag is weighed by hand, a size frame appears, a decision is made in seconds. When a carry-on is flagged, it's often gate-checked without much discussion. And once that tag is attached, you lose control of when or how you'll see that bag again. This moment creates a sharp spike of stress. Items you intended to keep nearby are suddenly disappearing into the cargo hold. Medications, medical documents, things you plan to access during the flight. Even if nothing is technically prohibited, policy takes priority over personal need. What makes this especially frustrating is that many of these decisions didn't exist a few years ago. Standards have tightened quietly, allowances have narrowed, and passengers relying on past experience often don't realize the rules have shifted until the gate agent is already reaching for a tag. There was no big announcement, no warning email, no clear notice during booking. But the rules have changed, and honestly, they're being enforced more strictly than ever. Over the past year, airlines and airports have quietly tightened policies that, affect passengers over 60 the most. Personal item size limits have narrowed. What once passed without comment is now measured. Battery rules, especially for medical and assistive devices, are being checked more closely. Assistance requests that were previously handled informally now require earlier notice or, clearer documentation. And boarding cutoffs are enforced with less flexibility, even when delays happen earlier in the journey. The problem isn't that these rules exist, it's that many experienced travelers are still operating under older assumptions. You remember what worked 5 or 10 years ago, so you plan the same way. But enforcement has shifted from discretion to procedure, and procedure doesn't adjust for experience or age. This is where unease sets in. You realize nothing went wrong, the environment changed around you, and the longer you rely on what used to be acceptable, the more likely you are to be caught off guard by a rule you didn't know had already moved. One of the most dangerous assumptions in modern air travel is believing that experience still protects you. Many passengers over 60 have flown for decades. You know the routines, you know the flow, you trust what's worked every time before. But today's system doesn't recognize seniority, loyalty, or past success. TSA doesn't care how many times you've cleared security without issue. Airlines don't factor in how long you've been flying. Their decisions are driven by current policy, current enforcement, and current timing. The moment something doesn't fit those parameters, your history becomes irrelevant. This is often where shock sets in. You do what you've always done. Pack the same way, arrive with the same buffer, move at the same pace, and suddenly it's not enough. A rule is applied differently. A cutoff is enforced without explanation, and the response is immediate, not flexible. What makes this especially unsettling is how quietly it happens. No one says you made a mistake. No one explains what changed. You're simply told what's happening now. And by the time you realize the old rules no longer apply, the process has already moved past you. If airlines explained these rules clearly from the beginning, most passengers would behave differently. They would pack differently. They would arrive earlier. They would request assistance sooner. But that clarity rarely happens, and there's a reason for it. Air travel now runs on speed and liability. Airlines publish broad policies, then enforce the details at the last possible moment, at security, at the gate, or during boarding. By that point, responsibility has quietly shifted to the passenger. If something goes wrong, it's framed as a personal issue, not a system failure. This structure protects schedules and reduces debate. Gate agents aren't there to explain how a rule evolved. TSA officers aren't responsible for your boarding time. Each part of the system enforces its piece, and no one owns the full outcome. Once you see this, the pattern becomes clear. Confusion isn't an accident. It's a byproduct of a system designed to keep moving forward without stopping to educate. And passengers over 60 who rely more on clarity and consistency are the ones most affected when enforcement replaces explanation. Flying after 60 isn't dangerous. Flying without understanding how the rules actually work is. The system hasn't become hostile, but it has become less forgiving, more automated, and far less flexible than it once was. And that shift matters more as your needs change. This isn't about being demanding or expecting special treatment. It's about recognizing that modern air travel no longer adapts on its own. If you don't prepare differently, speak differently, and plan for enforcement instead of assumptions, the system will move forward without you. Most of the problems older travelers face don't come from mistakes. They come from outdated expectations. And once you see that clearly, everything about how you approach your next flight changes. This isn't fear, it's awareness. And awareness is what protects you before the airport ever has a chance to test you.